Hello! Today we are going to be talking about sigils, and in particular, one overpowered combination. Purity plus Daredevil. And now this really begins to be obvious how overpowered this combo is when you have at least one of them being a rare sigil, but it still does good work with two uncommon sigils. So since it costs so much to change sigils on my team, first of all I want to show you a fight with Daredevil plus Havoc. Here, my Ik'ez dragon does around about 300 billion damage, which definitely not too bad, but it could definitely be better. So the others take 283 billion and just over 300 billion with that combo. Now, if we go over to our Ik'ez dragon here and we swap off that one for a Purity, so now we have the Purity plus Daredevil combination with two uncommon sigils. So it's not difficult really to get uncommon versions of sigils. You tend to get quite a lot of them. And if we go back into this fight now, our Ik'ez dragon, when we go to attack him, just did 1.15 trillion damage. So that is a considerable difference in the amount of damage that our Ik'ez dragon just did there. And again, we'll go through this again, and we will attack this first dragon, 1.515 trillion. But the other two dragons barely take any damage still, which is really strange with how the interaction works with AoE damage. Because with Daredevil, it sacrifices HP for direct damage boost, which means that it's actually not as great with AoE attacks as you'd think, but it still means that that first dragon that you actually tried to take down will get the full boost. Now, Andy here with one rare Purity does around about 600 billion, depending on, whether we get boosted attack in the dragon, and that's with Purity plus Acceptance, because Andy's been getting buffed by my Nezha dragon quite a bit. But if we just bring in Andy in here on his own to make this a little bit simpler, again, this is one rare Purity, and that's 600 billion damage. Which again, is not too bad, and plus you can buff Andy here with a Dragon with Wonder, and then Andy will do about 1.1 to just over a trillion damage. But if we change off this Acceptance sigil to a Daredevil sigil, so now, again, it's another uncommon Daredevil. I don't actually have a rare version of it yet. We go into the same fight. So let's go and attack a dragon with this rare Purity and uncommon. That's 1.76 trillion damage. So the amount of bonus that you actually get for putting on just Purity plus Daredevil is insane compared to the other combinations. And there are some pretty cool combinations that you can do with metal, including Wonder plus Acceptance, but they require setup. Now, the place where this combination of sigils really shines is in the arena. Because if we throw in our two dragons here that have that Purity plus Daredevil combo, it doesn't really matter what our third dragon is. Ideally, you'd want a healer, but it doesn't matter. And we'll attack this dragon, 1.76 trillion, and even though that OR dragon had two rare sigils, 1.24 trillion on our Ik'ez there, it still gets one shot, even though they have two rare sigils equipped, and my Ik'ez dragon, for example, only has two uncommons. So this means that if you were around for the arena in the Elite League before we got sigils, essentially the best strat tended to just be to one-shot your enemies, because then they're down a dragon and you're almost always going to win past that point. But if we can just one-shot two dragons with our first two attacks, it is going to be close to impossible for you to ever lose a fight. The only time where this really becomes a problem is obviously because when you attack with this combo, you're going to lose HP, which means that your attack's actually going to go down, because Purity gives you bonus attack damage based on your max HP. So the fights need to end quickly, and you can see that they do. Especially if we had two rare versions of these sigils on both our Autumn and our Ik'ez dragon here. And of course, if you've got the Exception Ancients or Divines and you put this combo on them, it's going to be insanely high damage. Again, this isn't the best or perfect scenario, because ideally we'd have full rares or above for rarity of these, because the difference between rare purity and uncommon purity, I think, is the difference between like 294% bonus in uncommon compared to over 400% with rare, which is why you see such a disparity between damage of my Autumn Dragon and Ik'ez here, and it's purely down to the Autumn having one rare sigil. So this is the reason why commons are going to struggle, especially because if you can't equip at least a rare sigil, you're not going to be able to pull off combinations like this. So, you know, it sucks for old common teams and dragons that don't have the ability to come out with combos like this, because the common versions work against dragons with common sigils, but they don't really do enough. But you can see these are the hard fights in the arena, and they really do not pose much of a threat whatsoever. And again, we could swap our third dragon, maybe have a third dragon with the same sigil combination, and it would probably go just as well. So, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I know that a lot of people are struggling with finding either super high damage sigil combos or just finishing the map in general. And again, if you're going to go in the dungeon, I really do think that Acceptance is better in a lot of scenarios, because this combo of Purity plus Daredevil is better for just clearing map fights and arena fights, because you can clear them instantly. But since the dungeon is mainly about surviving, staying alive for as many waves as you can, Acceptance tends to work a lot better. If you've got a healer, you buff the dragons, and like give it a purity and then buff it with Acceptance. That has been working wonders for me. But it does also depend on the type of dragons you have and their elements, because obviously if you've got more metal dragons, void dragons, things like that, it can work differently. And plus, it is really good to have an Ancient in the first slot, because an Ancient with Purity Daredevil, and say you start off with their Ancient attack, which zucks the enemy's damage, you can make sure that whatever dragon you target, if you can't one-shot it, it's not really going to be able to do too much damage to you. But I just wanted to make sure that people were aware that this is a combo that makes the arena super duper easy, but you do have to spend the trinkets changing between specific sigils, so you need to be smart about it. But, you know, if you want to do over 2 trillion damage with even one rare and one uncommon sigil, this is how you do it.